nobody in the quiet neighborhood of Stonebridge could explain it. Not then. Not in the frantic minutes that followed. Not even after everything came crashing into the light. All they knew, all anyone saw that morning, was a small 8-year-old boy standing frozen at the edge of his front yard, while 14 fully trained police canine German shepherds surrounded him in a perfect, impossibly coordinated circle. It didn't look real. It didn't look possible. It looked staged for a movie. Too precise, too synchronized, too intentional. But it wasn't a movie. It was the beginning of something far stranger and far heavier than anyone was prepared for. His name was Malik Carter, a quiet kid with soft eyes and a posture that always seemed a little guarded, like he'd learned young how to shrink into small spaces, how to fold himself inward when the world felt too big. His worn blue hoodie hung slightly off one shoulder. His shoelaces were mismatched. He wasn't the kind of child to cause a scene. If anything, he slipped through life like a shadow. And yet now, 14 K9s stood around him, bodies tense, ears raised, tails stiff, eyes locked on him with something too focused, too deliberate to be random. Neighbors screamed, doors flew open, cameras were raised, and yet Malik didn't run. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He simply stood there with his palms slightly lifted, not in fear, but in confusion. As if the dogs weren't threatening him at all. As if they were protecting him. A deep-throated bark exploded from one of the police cruisers as more officers sprinted toward the scene, forming their own perimeter around the dogs. Confusion swelled like a wave, officers shouting, dogs growling, neighbors panicking. And in the center of it all stood Malik, small and still, the morning sun turning the edges of his hair gold. Officer Ramirez, a seasoned K9 handler built like a brick wall with a jawline carved from stubbornness, stepped forward first. His own dog, Shadow, strained against the leash with a low, vibrating snarl that Ramirez hadn't heard from him in years. "Why are they doing this?" Ramirez muttered under his breath, though the question wasn't aimed at anyone specific. His face twisted, half disbelief, half something colder. K9 units didn't act like this. Not on their own. Not all at once. Unless they were triggered, or commanded, or reacting to something no one else could see. Another officer whispered, "Do we pull the boy back?" "Try it," someone else shot back. "And those dogs will rip your arms off." They're in full defense posture. Defense, not attack. Ramirez swallowed hard. He had worked with K9s for 15 years. He could tell the difference between aggression and guardianship. And these dogs were standing guard. But why him? A small boy in a blue hoodie? Ramirez raised both hands, trying to speak without spooking the dogs. "Kid, hey buddy, don't move, all right? We're gonna help you." Malik slowly looked up, meeting Ramirez's eyes, and for a heartbeat, just one, the officer's breath caught. The boy's eyes weren't panicked. They weren't pleading. They weren't even fearful. They were knowing, like he understood something none of the adults did. Like he recognized those dogs on a level deeper than logic. Then the moment snapped as the dogs shifted in unison, forming a tighter circle around him. A synchronized step, 14 paws striking the pavement at the exact same time. A wave rippled through the watching crowd. Fear, awe, disbelief. "Ramirez," one officer hissed. "This isn't normal. I've never seen—" "I have," Ramirez whispered, cutting him off. "Once." A heavy silence followed, But Malik couldn't hear any of that. His heart pounded like a trapped bird fluttering against his ribs, his breath coming sharp and uneven. His palms tingled. The sensation pushed through him like he was standing next to something humming, vibrating. A frequency he could feel more than hear. The dogs weren't looking at him. Not exactly. They were looking through him. Like something behind him, or beneath him, or inside him mattered more than the physical boy standing in front of them. The air buzzed, thick with tension that didn't belong to the dogs or the officers, but to something deeper, older, like instinct, but sharper. Some neighbors backed away. Some pulled out phones. Others froze entirely. And then Malik's mother burst through the gathering crowd. "Malik!" she screamed, stumbling, her voice cracking from terror. "Baby, don't move. Stay right there. Oh God, please." She tried to run toward him. 3 canines immediately swung their bodies between her and the circle, blocking her path with barking so fierce she collapsed to her knees, hands trembling as she raised them in helpless surrender. "No, no, please. That's my son, my baby. Please." Tears ran down her cheeks, dropping onto the asphalt as she sobbed. Ramirez grabbed her shoulder, voice firm but gentle. "Ma'am, we're doing everything we can." "No," she choked, shaking her head. "You don't understand. He's just a child. He's scared." But Malik wasn't. Not exactly. His confusion grew, yes, but fear never fully bloomed. It was as if he sensed something in the dogs. A message? A signal? A silent intention? He couldn't translate, but instinctively trusted. Slowly, he lowered his right palm. All 14 dogs lowered their heads. Gasps erupted around the circle. He lifted his hand again. The dogs lifted their heads. A trembling whisper escaped someone in the crowd. What is he doing?" Ramirez's breath fogged in the morning air. "It's not him," he murmured. "It's something else." But even he didn't believe that fully. Malik didn't understand what was happening, only that something inside him felt pulled, like a thread connecting him to every pair of canine eyes around him. He whispered, voice barely audible, "Why are you looking at me?" The nearest dog, massive, amber-eyed, fur bristling along its spine, let out a soft, rumbling sound. Not a growl, not a bark, a vocalization that felt almost like grief. Then without warning, the dog stepped forward until its nose was inches from Malik's chest. Officers shouted. Neighbors screamed. Malik froze. But the dog didn't bite. It didn't bark. It slowly, softly, pressed its forehead against Malik's hoodie, right over his heart. Every officer went silent. Every dog followed, bowing its head slightly, like 14 guardians acknowledging a truth no human had grasped yet. Ramirez's voice faltered when he finally spoke. "I think they're choosing him." The murmuring crowd stilled, the weight of those words sinking like a stone thrown into deep water. Choosing him? A child? For what? Malik's mother sobbed harder, confusion mixing with fear. But she didn't dare move. No one did. Because something was changing in the air. Something clicking into place. One of the officers pointed at the ground near Malik's feet. "Look!" And when everyone leaned closer, they saw it. Half hidden in the grass. A torn piece of fabric, dirty, frayed, and covered in dried blood. Malik's breath hitched. That wasn't from him. That wasn't from any of the dogs. That wasn't from anyone present. It was older, weathered, left there intentionally, or dropped during something violent. Ramirez crouched slowly, never breaking eye contact with the 14 dogs. He reached out one trembling hand and pinched the fabric between his fingers. The moment he lifted it, all 14 dogs growled in unison, a deep, guttural warning that vibrated the pavement. Ramirez froze. "Everyone, step back." The crowd instinctively retreated, a ripple of bodies shifting away from the scene, like a tide pulled by gravity. Ramirez unfolded the dirty scrap of fabric, and everyone saw it, a child's jacket, pink, faded, stained, but that wasn't the part that made Ramirez go pale. On the inside, stitched in thread that was nearly invisible unless you knew where to look, was a name: Lila Harrison missing. 2 years. Presumed dead. Malik didn't know that name. He didn't know that case. He didn't know anything. Except the sudden rush of dizziness. The feeling that the world had tilted sharply and he was sliding toward something he didn't understand. The dogs growled again. Not at him, but at the fabric. At the revelation. Why here? Why now? Why at Malik's feet? More questions slammed into the officers, but every answer felt impossibly far away. His mother reached out, voice cracking. "Please, someone, tell me what's happening." But nobody could, because 14 elite canine dogs didn't just surround a random child on a calm Saturday morning. Not unless they were led there. Not unless something or someone drew them. Then, suddenly, the deepest growl rippled through the pack. Their bodies shifted in perfect synchronization, turning away from Malik and toward the tree line across the street. Ears raised, noses twitching, tails stiffening. Something was out there. Something they sensed, something they recognized. Ramirez said it first, voice hollow. "They're tracking." Another officer whispered. "Tracking what?" Ramirez didn't answer. He didn't have to. The dogs lunged toward the trees, pulling every handler off balance, dragging them like rag dolls toward the shadows at the edge of the neighborhood. For one breathless moment, the world paused as every officer struggled to hold back hundreds of pounds of snarling, determined muscle. And then, in an instant, the leashes tore free. All 14 dogs bolted into the woods. Malik watched them disappear, his pulse thundering, a sensation blooming in his chest like a warning, like recognition, like fear. He didn't know why, but he knew with absolute certainty. Whatever those dogs were chasing had something to do with him, and something to do with the blood-stained jacket fragment sitting inches from his shoes. The moment stretched, air thick with dread and anticipation. Officers scrambled, radios crackling, handlers sprinting after their dogs. Malik's mother clutched him, dragging him into her arms, but he didn't take his eyes off the woods. He felt pulled, as if an invisible thread tied his heartbeat to the footsteps fading into the distance. Something was calling, something familiar, something dark. And though he didn't speak, though he didn't move, though fear knotted in his stomach, Malik knew the truth before anyone said it aloud. This was only the beginning. Malik didn't sleep that night. He lay awake in his room, staring at the faint glow of streetlight leaking through his curtains, listening to the slow breathing of the German shepherd curled at the foot of his bed. The house felt too quiet, as if the world were holding its breath after everything that had happened. His thoughts kept circling back to the bunker, to the girl whispering that she remembered him, to the dog's trembling stance at the entrance, and to the weight of something he didn't fully understand settling into his chest. Down the hall, his mother paced. He could hear the soft creak of the floorboards under her feet. She paused outside his room more than once, as if deciding whether to come in, but she never opened the door. Maybe she was afraid that if she did, he would disappear the moment she looked away. Maybe she just didn't know what to say yet. Malik didn't blame her. He didn't know either. When morning finally bled into the sky, pale and uncertain, Malik slipped out of bed and moved quietly to the living room. His mother sat on the couch, her face in her hands. The dog padded behind Malik, tail low but attentive. She looked up the moment she heard them. "Baby," she whispered, standing quickly and pulling him into her arms. Her voice cracked. "I didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing you out there, with those dogs, with those officers, in that forest." He hugged her back, feeling her whole body trembling. "I'm okay, Mom." She pulled away slightly, cupping his cheeks in her palms. "You could have been taken that night. 2 years ago. I didn't know. I didn't have a clue." He nodded, not knowing how to answer. The memory of that night was still jagged like broken glass, being pieced together. Before either of them could say more, there was a knock on the door. Slow, respectful, familiar. Ramirez stood outside wearing a tired expression, his uniform jacket unbuttoned, as if he hadn't slept either. His canine partner stood beside him, tail wagging faintly when he spotted Malik's dog. "Morning," Ramirez said softly. His mother hesitated before opening the door wider. "I suppose you're here to ask him questions?" "Not today," he replied, shaking his head. "Today I'm here because the kids we found, they want to see him." Malik blinked. "Me?" "Yeah." Ramirez rubbed the back of his neck. "The older girl, her name is Emily. We finally got it confirmed last night. She said you being there made her feel safe enough to come out. And the younger boy hasn't spoken to anyone yet. But when we showed him a photo of you with your dog, he reached for the screen." His mother's eyes softened with something between fear and pride. "Can he visit?" Malik asked tentatively. Ramirez nodded. "The doctors cleared it, if you're up for it." Malik glanced at his mother. She exhaled, defeated but relieved. "If he wants to go, I'll take him." "No," Ramirez said gently. "Let me. He knows the terrain of the situation. No offense." She managed a small smile. "None taken." The drive to the hospital was quiet. Malik sat in the back seat with both dogs pressed against him, his rescuer on one side, Ramirez's trained veteran on the other. The weight of them grounded him more than words could. As they walked through the hospital hallway, nurses and officers recognized Malik. Some smiled. Some nodded with unspoken respect. A few looked at him with that soft, fragile expression, reserved for people who've been touched by something dark, but survived it anyway. Ramirez led him to a small room with pastel walls and a window overlooking the parking lot. 2 small figures sat on the bed, Emily and the younger boy. Emily's hair had been washed, braided loosely by a nurse. The boy clutched a stuffed toy someone had given him. When Malik stepped inside, Emily's entire face changed. The fear melted for a moment, revealing something warm, grateful, and deeply tired. "You're real," she whispered. To anyone else, the words might have sounded strange. But Malik understood. When you live in darkness long enough, you start to wonder if the world outside still exists or if it faded without you. He stepped forward, his dog close at his heel. Emily's eyes widened at the animal. "That's him," she said softly. "That's the dog you were with. I remember him from the street, when they tried to grab you." Her voice faltered, trembling. The boy reached toward Malik's dog, fingers barely brushing its fur before he hesitated. The dog lowered its head and licked his hand gently. Something loosened in the boy's posture. He leaned forward and buried his face against the shepherd's neck. Ramirez swallowed hard. That's the first time he's let anyone touch him since last night. Malik sat on the edge of the bed, unsure of what to say, but not needing words. Emily watched him carefully. Then she whispered, "Do you want to know how we survived?" He looked at her, the room fading a little. "You don't have to tell me," he said softly. "I want to," she replied, "because someone needs to know. Someone who won't twist it or make it sound worse for the news." Malik nodded. Emily took a shaky breath. We weren't alone all the time. Sometimes the man, whoever he was, left for long stretches. Days, maybe. It was hard to tell. But we learned how to save food. We whispered stories to each other. We made plans. We promised we wouldn't forget who we were. She glanced at the boy beside her. "He's not my brother, but I chose him, like he was." The boy leaned into her side, eyes half closed. "And every night," Emily continued, "I prayed someone would find us. I prayed that someone would hear us." Malik felt his heartbeat in his throat. "But they never heard," she said. "Not until the dogs came. Not until you came." He dropped his gaze. "I didn't do anything." "Yes," she said firmly. "You did. You remembered something even though it hurt. And the dogs, they remembered you. That's why they ran. That's why they found us." Tears burned Malik's eyes, but he blinked them away. Emily smiled softly, though her eyes were older than they should have been. "You didn't just show up today. You showed up 2 years ago." Ramirez cleared his throat and stepped back, giving them space. Malik sat with them until the sunlight shifted on the wall and the nurse gently asked them to rest. Before he left, Emily took his hand. "Tell your dog thank you," she whispered. Malik nodded. "I will." Outside, the world felt different, brighter in some ways, heavier in others. Reporters swarmed the front of the hospital, but officers held them back. People wanted answers, timelines, motives. But some truths don't arrive neatly packaged. Ramirez walked Malik back to the cruiser. "You did good in there," he said. "Are they going to be okay?" Malik whispered. Ramirez didn't lie. "Not right away, not completely. But they have a chance now. And sometimes, that's the whole battle." They drove home in silence, the dogs resting with their heads on Malik's lap. His mother ran out the moment the car pulled up, pulling him into her arms again. But this time, Malik hugged her even tighter. In the days that followed, the town changed, slowly, but unmistakably. People stopped walking with their heads down. Neighbors checked on each other more. Strangers left candles outside the police station. Children who used to avoid the woods now stood at the edge of the street watching the tree line, as if waiting for the dogs to reappear, like guardians. And at the center of it all was Malik. Not a hero by choice, not a symbol by intention. Just a boy who followed a feeling he didn't understand and let it guide him. One afternoon, a ceremony took place outside the sheriff's department. Officers lined up in formation. The K-9s sat proudly beside their handlers. Ramirez stepped forward with a small box. "Malik," he said, "for bravery, cooperation, and a courage most adults don't have." He opened the box. Inside was a medal. Simple, silver, stamped with a paw print. The crowd applauded. His mother cried quietly into her hands. The dog barked once, as if agreeing with the decision. Malik accepted the medal awkwardly, cheeks hot, not knowing where to look. But when he glanced down, Ramirez smiled at him in a way that made the moment bearable. "Thank you," Malik whispered. "You earned it," Ramirez said. "And so did your partner." He scratched the dog behind the ear. The dog wagged its tail. 1 week later, Malik visited the canyon again, this time in daylight and with permission. Officers had cleaned the area, clearing debris, sealing the bunker, filling the air with the sound of workers and tools instead of fear. The dog trotted ahead of him, sniffing the ground as if making sure the place no longer held shadows. Malik stood near the ravine, feeling the wind on his face. He didn't feel haunted. He didn't feel afraid. He felt finished. As he turned to leave, the dog bumped his leg gently and looked up at him. "We did it," Malik whispered. The dog barked softly, the sound echoing across the rocks. Together, they walked back toward the street, toward home, toward the life waiting for them beyond the trees. The darkness had ended. The missing were found. The story had closed. And the boy who once almost disappeared had helped bring 2 others back into the light.